The person who's probably done more research on the topic than any other is journalist Linda Moulton Howe.
The Black Pyramid was determined to be some type of a power generation system.
For 25 years, Linda Moulton Howe stayed silent. She had military pilots, NORAD officers, Navy engineers, and government scientists telling her things about Antarctica that no one was ever supposed to hear. Coordinates, classified operations, structures buried 2 miles beneath the ice. She locked it all in a single file and refused to publish a word of it. Then, one by one, the men who trusted her started dying. And in 2024, she finally broke. What she released next is the part the official story cannot survive. And once you hear it, you will understand why they buried it. The first witness, Antarctica, was first sighted in 1820 by Russian explorers. They saw endless ice, brutal winds, and a place too dangerous for ordinary travel. For more than a century, the interior remained blank on the map, quiet, untouched, forgotten. Then aircraft started crossing it, and in 1982, one of those flights produced the witness whose voice would haunt Linda Moulton Howe for the next 4 decades. He was a United States Navy flight engineer. The mission was supposed to be routine. His aircraft departed from McMurdo Station and headed deep into the continent on a supply run to a remote research camp. The crew followed standard procedures. The weather was harsh, but expected. Then something went wrong. An equipment malfunction forced an emergency landing on a high ridge far from any research outpost. The wind hit the plane like a hammer. The temperature dropped so low that exposed skin could freeze in seconds. The crew worked fast, because every minute on that ridge was a minute closer to death. While the others worked, the flight engineer looked out across the ridge, and he saw something that did not belong. In the distance, against the white, were clean lines, sharp angles, perfect symmetry. Ice does not form like that. Snow does not produce straight edges or smooth, flat surfaces. He moved closer, and what he saw stopped him cold. A massive structure stood partially exposed, where decades of wind had stripped away the ice covering it. Solid, carefully shaped. The surface did not look like rock, and it did not look like ice. It looked like something built, something engineered, something placed there with intention. The radio came alive. Repair finished. Get on board. Now. When the aircraft landed back at base, intelligence officers were already waiting. The crew was separated. Each man was questioned alone. The flight logs were taken and marked classified. Every member of the crew was made to sign non-disclosure agreements, and then they were given a single instruction. This never happened. He kept his promise. For nearly 20 years, he stayed silent. He retired, he grew older, and in 1998, in his 70s and aware that time was running out, he picked up the phone and reached out to a journalist who had built a reputation for protecting her sources. He reached out to Linda. She listened to every word. She let him go at his own pace. When he finished, she did what she always did before publishing anything. She pulled his service records, confirmed his postings, verified his clearance. Everything matched. The man was real. The mission was real. The flight path checked out. Linda set the testimony down on her desk and stared at it. One witness, one story. Not enough? She knew she could not publish a claim this large on the word of a single source, no matter how credible. So she did the hardest thing a journalist can do. She waited. She did not yet know that the phone was about to start ringing. The strange pattern. Stay with me, because this is where the story stops being about one man. After 1998, Linda continued her regular work. She kept the flight engineer's testimony in a sealed file, and then slowly, the calls began to come in. Over the next 2 decades, witness after witness reached out to her. Different branches, different disciplines, different countries, different decades. None of them knew each other. None of them had compared notes, and every one of them described variations of the same impossible thing. A geophysicist contacted her first. He had worked on ice-penetrating radar surveys, and during one mission, he watched the readings come back wrong. Not natural cavities, not stress fractures, enormous open spaces deep below the surface, with shapes too regular to be random. He reported it up the chain. His supervisor went silent. Within hours, the readings were classified. Data was scrubbed from the system. His team was reassigned, and no one was permitted to discuss what they had seen. Linda wrote down every detail. Then she opened the 1982 file beside it. The patterns matched. The next call came from a Navy CB. He described a mission that took his unit miles away from any known research station, with no scientific briefing and no explanation. There was only one instruction: drill straight down. When the shaft hit its target depth, He was lowered to the bottom. There, in the frozen darkness, he saw walls that were metallic and smooth, surfaces too perfect to be natural. He stood there with his breath fogging in front of him and felt a sense of dread he had never felt before. Something had built this, and it had been built a very long time ago. Then a scientist from Argentina's Esperanza base contacted Linda. He told her his team sometimes pulled objects from ice cores dated to more than 12,000 years old, objects that did not look natural. And every single time something unusual surfaced, military personnel arrived within hours, took the samples, and left no record behind. No reports, no papers, no photographs. The findings simply ceased to exist. A pilot reached out next. He described flying across Antarctica and noticing a restricted zone that did not appear on any official map. Civilian flights could not enter it. Even military pilots needed special clearance to cross it. When he asked his superior what was inside that zone, he was given 2 words and a warning. Sensitive research. Stop asking. Linda spread the files across her desk. The geophysicist, the CB, the Esperanza scientist, the pilot, the 1982 flight engineer at the top of the stack. These men had never met. They came from different services, different nations, different decades, and their accounts pointed in the same direction. This was no longer one impossible story. It was a pattern. But she still needed something more, something that would tie it all together. In 2016, a message arrived in her inbox that did exactly that, and the man who sent it would change everything she thought she knew. The buried structures. Linda would later describe him as the most credible source she had ever interviewed. He was a retired NORAD officer with classified clearance. He had been involved in Antarctic operations in the early 2000s, and he was finally ready to talk. He told her that beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet, at a depth of approximately 2 miles, there were structures that did not belong to nature. Not rock formations, not ice anomalies, built forms, shaped with precision, designed. Then he told her something even harder to absorb. The structures were older than the ice that covered them. They predated the last ice age, built more than 12,000 years ago, at a time when Antarctica was not frozen at all, a green continent with rivers and forests, before the climate of the entire planet shifted and buried whatever had been there under miles of ice. Linda put her pen down. If you have made it this far, hit subscribe. This channel exists for the people who refuse to accept the official story, and you just became one of them. The officer kept going. He told her the anomalies had first been detected during Operation High Jump in 1946 to 47, the famous Antarctic expedition led by Admiral Richard Byrd, officially, training, and research. The classified data told a different story. Seismic surveys had picked up signals deep beneath the ice that did not match any known geological pattern. The readings were filed away. The public was told nothing. Over the following 70 years, several governments quietly continued the work. The United States, the Soviet Union, and later Russia, China. None of them treated their Antarctic missions as ordinary science. The publicly stated purposes were always reasonable: ice core analysis, climate modeling, glaciological mapping. The actual work, according to the officer, was something else entirely: recovery operations. Teams were not just studying these locations, they were trying to extract things from them. Some sites were reachable through natural ice caves that had opened during seasonal melt. Others required deep shafts drilled straight down through miles of ice, using equipment that had no place on a normal scientific mission. And what was being recovered was not isolated ruins or scattered fragments. It was an entire complex, something that resembled a city, the officer said. Buried, preserved, waiting. And not all of it was inert. Some of the recovered objects, he said, still functioned. Researchers did not understand how the devices operated, but they had confirmed that they worked. The items were moved to classified facilities for further study, where they remained. Linda asked for proof. He sent coordinates. He sent redacted internal documents. The documents showed project names connected to those exact locations. She sat with the file for a long time that night, because the pieces had finally clicked together in a way they never had before. The story she had been quietly building for almost 2 decades had just become something far larger than she had imagined. And then a single question began to form in her mind, the one she could not let go of. If these structures were real, what did the men who were sent down those shafts actually see? The drilling operations. The answer arrived in a voice she did not expect to hear. A military contractor. He had worked on a classified drilling operation in 2003. Now he was sick. He told Linda he did not have much time, and he wanted someone to know what he had seen before he ran out of it. His team had drilled a deep shaft into the Antarctic ice. They were not given a real briefing. They were told only that they were accessing a geological anomaly. As he descended, the walls of the shaft glowed white and blue, etched with long, frozen patterns. The light from the surface shrank above him until it became a small, bright circle. Then it was gone. There was only the darkness and the lights mounted on his equipment. Then the ice ended, not gradually, not with a transition. It simply stopped. He stepped off the platform into an enormous open chamber. The space was wrong in a way he struggled to describe. It was not a cave. It was not natural. The walls carried markings that looked like symbols, patterns that did not match any known writing system on Earth. The team stood in silence, taking it in. Then he saw it, a doorway, set into the wall, leading deeper. He wanted to walk through it. He was not allowed. Only personnel with higher clearance were permitted past that point. He watched as scientists and military officers prepared to enter. He watched the door close behind them, and then he was sent back to the surface. When he reached the end of his account, he gave Linda the line that she would never be able to put down. "People should know. We found something down there that changes history." Linda sat with the recording in her ear long after the call ended. Now, here is the part nobody talks about. The man on that recording was running out of time, and he knew it. He had handed her a sentence built like a key. The question was, what door had actually opened? Because if a contractor at the bottom of an Antarctic drill shaft saw scientists walk through a doorway into something older than the ice, then Linda was no longer documenting an anomaly. She was documenting a cover-up, and the people who had handled what came back up that shaft were about to start calling her too. Recovered technology evidence. The materials scientist did not want to meet in person. He chose his words carefully, and when he finally agreed to speak with Linda, he asked her to confirm 3 times that the conversation was secure. He told her he had briefly studied samples that had come back from Antarctic recovery operations. He had spent his career running materials through every analytical instrument his lab could throw at them: spectrometers, electron microscopes, isotope readers. He knew what the inventory of human metallurgy and mineralogy looked like. He could identify almost anything by composition alone. He had been doing this work for 30 years. The Antarctic samples did not match anything in any known database. He described the moment he realized it on the phone with her. The instruments returning readings that simply did not belong to any cataloged material on Earth. Running it again, running it a 3rd time. The numbers refusing to resolve into anything familiar. He told Linda he did not sleep well for weeks afterward, because once you have held something like that in your hand, you cannot unhold it. He kept thinking about where it had come from, who had made it, how long it had been buried before someone drilled down and pulled it back up into the light. He told Linda he had walked away from the program shortly after. He did not say what had finally pushed him out. He only said that some things, once you have seen them, you cannot keep working alongside. 2 more sources filled in the edges. A satellite imagery analyst told Linda he had seen unusual shapes in raw Antarctic imagery before it was processed for public release. Sections blurred or removed entirely. Someone cleaning the data before any of it ever reached the outside world. An NSF logistics coordinator described equipment manifests that did not belong to any normal research mission. Heavy excavation tools, sealed containers, transport routes connected directly to the Department of Defense. The paperwork did not describe science. It described retrieval, and here is where it gets dark. One detail kept turning up across testimonies. Electronic equipment failed near certain locations. Compasses spun. Instruments malfunctioned, as if something below the ice was reaching upward and interfering with the surface above it. Linda mapped the accounts against each other on the wall above her desk. The picture was no longer a collection of strange anecdotes. It was a coordinated, multi-decade operation happening underneath one of the most remote landscapes on Earth. And then, one by one, the men on her wall began to die. The truth finally revealed. By 2020, Linda had collected more than 15 credible testimonies, verified coordinates, cross-checked names and service records, matched details across sources who had never spoken to each other. Each man had taken a personal risk in coming forward. Each one had asked her to protect him until the right moment came. The right moment never came. Time came instead. The first calls were soft: a daughter, a widow, a colleague, each one telling her the same thing in slightly different words. That someone she had spent years interviewing was gone. The 1982 flight engineer, the geophysicist, the Esperanza scientist, names she had transcribed in her own handwriting, now in obituary columns. Each loss arrived the same way, a short notification, a funeral she could not attend without revealing how she had known him, a folder she had to mark quietly with a date. Then, in 2022, the retired NORAD officer died. He had been the most credible source she had ever interviewed. He was the man who had handed her the coordinates, the man who had told her the structures were older than the ice. He was the spine that held the rest of the testimonies upright. Linda was at her desk when she found out. The unpublished file was open in front of her, exactly where it had been for years. She read the notice twice. She did not cry. She just sat there and understood, with a clarity that was almost physical, what had happened to her. She had become the archive. There was no one else left who knew what these men had told her. No one else who had cross-referenced their accounts. No one else who could verify that the geophysicist's radar readings matched the CB's drill site, that the contractor's chamber sat directly beneath the NORAD officer's coordinates. If she died next, all of it died with her. The promises she had made to keep them safe had outlived the men themselves, and the only thing left to protect now was the truth they had handed her. In a 2023 interview, she finally said the words out loud. She said that she had reached the point where, if she did not tell the story completely, with all the details and all the sources she could responsibly name, then the truth those men had trusted her with would die with them. She said she had a responsibility to make sure their testimonies survived. That was when she made her decision. In late 2023, she began assembling what she called a comprehensive Antarctic report. Every testimony, every coordinate, every operation detail, every piece of supporting evidence from more than 25 years of investigation, drawn together into a single body of work. In early 2024, she began releasing portions of it through her platform, earthfiles.com. She published the coordinates witnesses had reported. She made declassified Operation High Jump documents available, redactions and all. She invited researchers, journalists, and ordinary people to look at the evidence themselves, to verify what they could, to draw their own conclusions. And then she waited for the response. It never came. Not really. There were no government denials, no confirmations, no statements, no explanations. Only silence. To Linda, that silence said everything. After a quarter century of being told there was nothing to see, that the witnesses were mistaken, that the data did not exist, the absence of any rebuttal felt like the loudest answer of all. It felt like confirmation that something extraordinary had been hidden beneath the ice for a very long time, and that those who knew about it were not yet prepared to address it openly. What is buried beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet? Who built it? When did they build it? And what happens when the world finally has to acknowledge that it is there? Linda Moulton Howe spent her career listening to men who carried secrets they could not take to their graves. She is the last one left holding what they told her, and she has finally decided that we are going to hear it. If this opened your eyes, drop a like, hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments what you think Linda found beneath that ice. We will see you in the next one.